Part 60. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 605. Miao. This book has been written for a year and a half, and it is finally finished. Because I am not very good at writing a closing statement, I will just say whatever comes to mind. Readers should also be able to see that a lot of content in the last chapter is omitted. In fact, I can still continue to write, but the protagonist has become the strongest, and it is difficult to write interestingly, so I will just finish the main line. When I opened the book and looked for information, I felt that there was a very special place in the worldview of Resident Evil. That is, although the outbreak of Resident Evil is commonplace, the world order has not been broken, and most people still live as usual, unlike the Doomsday world. So I originally wanted to write it in a spread, fill in the blanks that Capcom did not write, and try to restore a complete Resident Evil world. Unfortunately, due to my limited personal ability, plus the outline was forced to give up, someone said that they did not want to see how other characters act, and other reasons, I can only limit my perspective to the protagonist. But since it is all finished, if I write a sequel, I still want to focus on other people. At the beginning, this book was also used for practice, so I didn't think I would be signed, and I didn't expect to write 2.5 million words, but I finally finished it, and I also slapped the face of those who said I would be a eunuch. But it was precisely because I had the intention of practicing writing at the beginning, and the protagonist with a system was also my first attempt to write a system article. So I actually tried a lot of things in the early stage, such as the bottom line of the review, etc., otherwise I wouldn't have written a certain poisonous point on the spur of the moment. Maybe because I don't like stories without logic, and I'm worried that readers won't understand it, so when I started writing, it was indeed a bit cumbersome. There are also inappropriate omissions of the protagonist's name, inappropriate use of pronouns, and the addition of dot to the English name affects listening to the book. In addition, there are many other problems, such as the lack of grasp of the coolness, slow plot progress, collapse of combat power, and the inability to make character cards and groups. Because I was the only one who was groping, I slowly changed it after readers reminded me later. This Terra Grigia city? I am very grateful to the readers who made suggestions. Meow. The most regrettable thing is that a huge crisis occurred in chapter 206. After many revisions, it still couldn't pass. In the end, I had to delete that part of the content from all Terra Grigia city, and the subsequent outline was also torn up, so after the second volume, I went directly into the plot of Resident Evil 4. Although there are regrets, the next book should not be of the same type. I now have two choices. One is a Doomsday article, but it is different from the post-apocalyptic farming or killing. I will probably write about the story of Terra Grigia city during the period when the Doomsday comes and the order begins to collapse. The other is a weird suspense article. How to say a cock-mod author, another reason for choosing this aspect is that I want to play to my strengths. I pay more attention to logic when writing. Finally, thank you again for supporting my readers. I hope that the next book will also bring you fun. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 606. At the end of 2014, the extreme biochemical terrorist organization Alliance that had been hiding in the dark tried to cause a large-scale biochemical crisis in Terra Grigia city, but was caught by the well-prepared BasedonaMovie organization. When Luo Guang traveled to this world, Resident Evil 7 and 8 had already been released, so he naturally did not forget that the villains of these two works had not been resolved. Although the trajectory of the world has changed greatly because of his butterfly, some people cannot be changed, such as villains will always be villains and will not turn over a new leaf. Luo Guang knew the name of the villain in Resident Evil 7 and the location of the Baker family, but the incident did not happen, and they were just an ordinary family. Miranda in Resident Evil 8 has been silent for a long time. Although the village where the story takes place knows the approximate location, Miranda cannot be resolved, and only eliminating the fungus master will only make himself have one more enemy in the dark. It is easy to block an open spear, but it is difficult to prevent an arrow from the dark. Now he has a family, so naturally he does not want his enemies in the dark to attack his family. Therefore, while he was busy with marriage and raising children, he did not forget these villains and arranged a lot of people to investigate, just waiting to lock the target and catch these enemies in one fell swoop. Therefore, the biochemical crisis planned by the Alliance had long been discovered by Luo Guang and strangled in the cradle. The members of the organization who implemented the plan were captured by Parker and sent to Luo Guang's clone, and were asked a lot of information. The captured people were all dead men trained by the Alliance. They were all members of the Greyhound organization before. Therefore, even if the Alliance was worried that the captured members would be interrogated by the BSA organization to reveal information about their own organization, they were not too anxious to evacuate. However, whether they evacuated in the first time would not affect the outcome, because Luo Guang collected a lot of information about the Alliance. After blocking the opponent's plan, he immediately asked his men to start closing the net and dealt a heavy blow to the Alliance bases in various places. It is true that Luo Guang did not find out all the bases and information of the Alliance, but as long as he caught the high-level organization within the enemy, he could use the Shinra virus to infect the enemy and make the enemy speak. The Alliance was stunned by the BSA's lightning-fast attack, but they did not surrender. In order to keep the spark of counterattack, they chose a natural gas tanker called Annabelle to smuggle the biological weapon codenamed Evelyn to the lighthouse state. As a result, the ship seemed to have encountered a typhoon and ran aground near the mouth of the Dulvey Swamp in Louisiana. On the other hand, Luo Guang finally found clues about Miranda in the Alliance's Munich Institute. This enemy was a senior researcher in the attacked institute. In other words, he immediately locked the villain boss of the Resident Evil 7 and 9, and could implement the cleanup plan. Steve, who succeeded as the head of the BSA North American branch more than a year ago, still retained the fine tradition of his predecessor Chris. He did not leave the front line, so he personally went to investigate the investigation of the Annabelle this time. By the way, the resigned Chris is now responsible for training the new recruits of the North American branch. According to Claire's information, her brother seems to have a girlfriend and is no longer obsessed with muscles all day long. Back to business, this investigation operation against the Annabelle was named Spanking by Luo Guang. Steve and others didn't know the meaning of the name of this operation. Although they felt strange, they didn't protest against the BSA commander-in-chief for naming the operation at random. The typhoon finally went away. Although it was still drizzling like smoke and fog, the helicopter could already fly in this weather. "Captain, I saw the Annabelle. The ship was broken into two sections. Judging from the situation of the storage tank, it seems that there was an explosion." Giovanni put his left hand on the control panel on the left side of the helmet and used the monitor of the helmet as a telescope. He was silent for a while, and after careful observation, he continued, "There is one more thing. With the ship as the center, there is a layer of black stuff covering it. The distance is too far, and the helmet cannot analyze it. But judging from the situation on the scene, there has been a biochemical leak." Steve nodded and took out a black sachet from his pocket. "What is this?" Another teammate Beidel was very surprised when he saw this. "The commander gave me a great trick, telling me to open it according to the design of the bag when I encounter something I don't understand or when it matches the content of the embroidered words in the bag." Steve took out a piece of paper from the bag while speaking. He said the contents on the paper, "This black thing is a kind of mold, which will spread mycelium and other things in the air. The commander told us to pay attention to the tightness of the mask on our body. If we inhale mycelium, we will have auditory and visual hallucinations. If this happens, we must be careful to avoid accidentally injuring friendly forces. Although the Munich Research Institute has been controlled by the BSA, there are remnants of the Apocalypse organization on the Alliance side. Therefore, the moment the Institute was attacked, the hardware storing the research data was physically destroyed, so Luo Guang could not find the research data of the biochemical fungus from it. Because there are many more biochemical microorganisms in this world, Luo Guang will not directly tell Steve and others the information in the game. The information written in the bag is actually a preliminary analysis of the collected biochemical fungus samples. Steve was slightly stunned when he read to the end. Beidel asked, "What's wrong, Captain?" Steve shook his head and said, "It's okay, I'm used to it." He saw that the last signature on the paper was not Luo Guang, but Zhuge Guang. Although he didn't understand Chinese and didn't know the meaning of Zhuge, he was sure that his commander was making trouble again. In order to maintain Luo Guang's dignity as a commander, he didn't say anything about it. Beidel and Giovanni looked at each other in silence. The helicopter pilot broke the silence and said, "Captain Steve, there is no place to land. I can only hover low on the path. You guys go down again. This is a swamp and at the mouth of the river, so without the help of ground personnel to confirm the geology, it is naturally impossible to rashly stop on those seemingly wide grounds. Although the ground hardness of the locals' path looks good, there are trees on both sides, and there is not enough space to land, so the driver will come up with this plan." Steve agreed to the plan. After the three confirmed that the equipment was fixed on their bodies, they started to move, followed the rope to the ground, and immediately went on alert. After Sylvia of their team died, they did not recruit new members, so it was still the three of them. The other two stood guard one after the other, while Steve turned on the radio, "Where are the ground troops? We have arrived at the farm. The owner's name is Jack Baker. We have investigated their identity and background. They should have nothing to do with the Alliance." The head of the ground force continued, "In addition, we have obtained the other party's permission to build a temporary base and arrange the helipad on the spot." Received. Steve nodded. It seemed that the operation was progressing well. Then he contacted the helicopter above and left first. Then he did not set off, but contacted the ground force again, asking the other party to build a base and immediately send follow-up troops for support. After explaining everything, Steve began to lead the two to the location of the Annabelle. In order to prevent accidents, they landed 200 or 300 meters away from the ship, so they had to walk a short distance. However, this section of the road was not peaceful. The alligators infected with fungi were several times larger than before and were extremely aggressive. They were startled by the loud noise of the helicopter engine before, but they were not afraid of it. Instead, they all crawled towards the place where Steve landed. The three of them cooperated well. Steve didn't need to give any orders. Beidel, who was holding the Thor's hammer shotgun, had already replaced the magazine with a full of single-headed bullets and started shooting. The other two also started shooting with assault rifles. No matter how big the mutant crocodile becomes, it is still a flesh and blood body, and its head is facing the three people, which makes it easier to hit the weak point. At the same time, the three are experienced antibiochemical warriors, so these mutant crocodiles naturally cannot pose a threat to them and are easily solved. "We are approaching the ship." Steve reported the situation at any time, including the previous encounter with the mutant crocodile, and asked his men to be careful of other mutant monsters in the swamp. Taking advantage of this time, Giovanni took out a test tube, scraped some samples from the black mycelium on the ground, and put them into the test tube. "Captain, the owner of the farm, Jack, said that his son came back from the ship not long before we arrived and told him about the ship." The person in charge of the ground force naturally had to report the situation at any time. "Son? Did he find anything on the ship?" "No, and he was worried that his parents would beat him up, so he ran home to inform them immediately after he knew about this. If we hadn't arrived just in time, Jack would have wanted to go to the ship to see if there were any survivors." "Wait a minute." Steve thought of something and took out a sachet from his body. Vidal asked curiously, "Why did you take it out now? Did you encounter something strange?" Steve answered while opening the sachet, "There is only one sachet that fits the situation." He handed the sachet to the other party, and then checked the contents of the note inside. Vidal said in surprise, "Son." The English letters of his son were embroidered on the sachet. No wonder Steve suddenly opened it. He then asked, "What's written on the paper?" Steve answered truthfully, "The commander said that this man named Lucas Baker is an engineering genius, but unfortunately he is suspected of having antisocial psychology. Let me think of a way to temporarily hold him back and prevent him from causing trouble." Giovanni put away the sample and interrupted, "Why does the commander seem to know everything about this place? If so, why do you still need us to come here to investigate? Can't you just give us orders and tell us what to do?" Luo Guang naturally couldn't do this, because the world of Resident Evil had changed its original trajectory because of his arrival. Maybe those villains are still villains, but they may not develop according to the plot of the game, just like the company Chaos. Steve explained from the perspective of BSA, the information of these two tips can be investigated, and it is not a prophecy. And we must have evidence after all, and we can't act blindly based on those intelligence one-sidedly. In fact, this was a special training for Steve by Luo Guang, but only Steve knew about this matter, and he gave him the tips for Claire's sake. Steve waved his hand, indicating that this topic would end here. Then he contacted the person in charge of the ground forces and asked, "This is Steve. Where are you?" The person in charge of the ground forces realized why the other party asked this, and said, "In the temporary base, there are no outsiders around." "What is the name of the Baker family's son?" "Lucas. We found a biochemical leak on the ship. I need you to temporarily isolate Lucas and conduct a physical examination on him." In order to prevent his men from being careless, Steve added, "That person is suspected to have antisocial psychology. Don't be careless. Just restrict his actions and let us complete the mission. There is no need to make a big fuss." I know the other party said it so clearly that the person in charge of the ground forces also knew what to do. He did not question the other party's reasons for suspecting Lucas or the source of the intelligence. Steve explained a few more words before hanging up the phone. He led his men to the middle position where the Annabelle was cut off in the middle. They thought of entering the ship directly from here and then searching from bottom to top. "Captain, look over there." Biwat, who was walking in the front, saw that there seemed to be a person lying in the mud in the middle. The man was covered with fungal mats, with only a rough human figure, which could easily be overlooked. It was the helmet scan that detected that there might be someone inside. "Go and confirm whether the person inside has any vital signs." Steve gave the order. Biwat took out a knife and carefully cut the fungal mat on the surface to avoid causing harm to the people inside. Although they all wore isolation gloves, they didn't know whether the people inside had mutated into monsters, so it was safest to take a knife, which would allow them to fight back immediately. Still alive, as soon as Biwat opened the surface fungal blanket, his helmet detected the other party's life signal. Steve immediately gave an order, without delving into whether the other party was an enemy or a friend: "Save people first. Giovanni, contact the helicopter to come over." After saying this, he walked over to check the survivor, who was wearing a short vest and was soaked all over. "Captain, this person's name is Mia Winters, and she works as a nanny." Biwat's helmet quickly confirmed the identity of the survivor through his appearance. After saying that, he picked up the gun again to alert the surrounding environment and handed the survivor to the captain. A nanny appeared on this natural gas transport ship. Steve was very surprised by this. Looking at the other party's name on the mask, he suddenly thought of something and smiled a little bitterly. Because of the mask, his teammates couldn't see his face, but they still saw him take out another treasure bag. Giovanni, who was in charge of the alert, said, "Captain, the commander gave you so many tips, just read them all at once." "Okay, one by one, although Steve promised Luo Guang that he would open these tips only when he encountered problems. But that was just a small game between the two sides, and he naturally couldn't let himself fail to check Luo Guang's reminder in time and cause teammates to die. He first opened the tips with the word Mia embroidered on it. What did the commander say? After reading the note, Steve said, "This person is from the Alliance, and it is suspected that he is the nanny who specializes in taking care of biological weapons." Evelyn. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 607. Because the information related to Mia's identity is more of the setting information of the Resident Evil game, Luo Guang used words such as possible and suspect very strictly when he said this, and asked Steve and the others to verify it again. Giovanni couldn't help but ask strangely, "Nanny of biological and chemical weapons? Is it a position like a researcher?" Steve opened the other tips and replied at the same time, "I think the remaining tips should be able to answer your question." He opened the brocade bag with the word little girl embroidered on it. This was the largest brocade bag Luo Guang gave him. Steve first took out the note inside and read it. At the same time, he sorted out the contents and told others, "The biochemical weapon that Mia Winters took care of is our target, Evelyn. She looks like a little girl appearance. The reason why the Alliance chose the appearance of a little girl is to make people relax their vigilance, just like the tyrant deliberately made it look like a human." The reason why Luo Guang wrote this in advance was because he was worried that Steve and the others would be confused by the target's appearance. The image of a little girl, it's really hard to deal with this. Giovanni has a daughter himself, so it was naturally difficult to deal with it, and he couldn't help but think of his lovely daughter. "I'll just ask myself what's going on with the biological and chemical weapons." After Steve finished speaking, he directly controlled the helmet and called Luo Guang. "Commander, what's going on with Evelyn?" He saw Luo Guang's message at the end of the paper. Luo Guang knew from the information monitored by the other party's helmet that the other party was not playing a trick game with him, but this was also expected by him. Anyway, when he gave the tips to him, he did so as a friend, not as a commander. Ordered by identity. He thought for a moment why the other party was looking for him, and replied, "As stated on the paper, the biochemical weapons developed by the enemy chose the image of a little girl to facilitate sneaking into the masses. So you must also remain vigilant, let alone inhale the biochemical fungus, otherwise I'm worried that the monster will use it to control you. There are many more types of biochemical viruses in this world than in the Resident Evil game. According to his analysis of biochemical fungi, it is expected that they are enhanced versions of the game settings. Although Steve has a variant of the T. Veronica virus in his body, it may not be able to solve the biochemical fungus invading his body, let alone his two teammates. I have found Mia. She fell directly to the ground without wearing any gas mask. It is very likely that she has." Steve suddenly thought of something, and his tone changed. "No, typhoon storm, natural gas explosion, biohazard plus ship breakage and other disasters, but the other party doesn't seem to have any wounds. She has been infected with biochemical fungus." Luo Guang helped him state the conclusion, and then continued, "There is another thing in the bag, did you see it? You see, what liquid is in the syringe? It was developed by the GIMS Research Institute. It is a special medicine that targets the enemy's biochemical fungi. When you meet Evelyn, you can find a way to inject this thing into the opponent's body and you can get close to the enemy." The syringe contained naturally not any special medicine, but physiological saline containing the Shinra virus. Although Luo Guang is a father, he has no idea of adopting Evelyn, a biochemical weapon, let alone any operation to influence the enemy. He continued, "In short, you cannot take it lightly, let alone be merciful." Steve repeated it carefully, just to tell the other two people what he said, and then asked the last question: if we accidentally inhale biochemical fungus, can the special medicine you mentioned save lives? How to deal with this relationship later, so he didn't ask more questions. Luo Guang didn't want the other three to let down their guard because they had the life-saving medicine, but in the end he answered truthfully, yes, 1 milliliter is enough in terms of dosage. You don't need to inject all of it, save it for Evelyn. He still chose to believe in the professionalism of the other three. I know. Steve nodded and hung up the phone. Back to Mia's matter, it will take some time for the support force to come here. Steve decided not to enter the Annabelle for the time being, but to wake Mia up first. He felt that as a monitor of biological and chemical weapons, the fact that Mia was lying here alone meant that something must have gone wrong. The biochemical weapon might have escaped the ship and entered the depths of the swamp, so it would be difficult for them to retrieve Evelyn. But as the enemy is a monitor, he may have some tracking methods, so he needs to ask Mia about the specific situation before making plans. The vital analyzer on the helmet has conducted a preliminary examination of Mia's body. There is no external injury and she seems to be malnourished. Steve first fed the other party some water and crushed energy bars, and then used Luo Guang to inject 1 milliliter of liquid into his syringe. Since he and the commander both judged that Mia had been infected, he directly used the special medicine just in time to see the effect of the medicine. The effect of the special medicine was somewhat surprising to Steve. Mia didn't have any violent reaction and woke up quickly. When she saw the person wearing a high-end helmet in front of her, she was also startled. She stood up and moved away from the weirdo in front of her. With quick eyesight and quick hands, Steve captured the opponent and prevented him from escaping. At the same time, he revealed his identity: we are the BSA task force, and we are here to investigate the biohazard incident that occurred on the Annabelle. Who are you? He saw the flash of uneasiness and fear in Mia's eyes, but did not point it out. Mia quickly hid her uneasiness in her heart, bit her lip, and made up her mind: I need your help. We can't let that guy get free. This made him sound like a villain, but Steve still replied, I can let you go, but don't think about running away. I won't run away. Mia just wanted to get help from the other party as soon as possible, so she cooperated very well. Steve let go of the other party, but his hand was on the pistol at his waist, still keeping vigilant, and asked, tell me why you fell here. Mia looked at where she was, surrounded by fungus stalls bred by biochemical fungi, and saw that the other three were wearing gas masks, so she thought that the other party was worried that she was infected with biochemical fungi and was so vigilant, but she didn't expect that her identity had been exposed. She took a deep breath and slowly told what she remembered. In fact, she had been tortured by Evelyn's spirit these days, and her memory had become confused. But Luo Guang used the Shinra virus to clean the fungus in her body and let her recall what happened before in her mind, so Mia can now tell the true and clear memory. I am a direct agent of the Alliance organization and the guardian responsible for monitoring the biological weapon Evelyn. Mia didn't care about the battle between the enemy and our organizations at this time. She was tortured by Evelyn in the spiritual world and knew what a mess she had done before. She just wanted to eliminate Evelyn now, give herself a freedom, and then reunite with her husband. Even if she would be punished by law, she would accept it. Steve and the other two didn't react violently after hearing this, which made Mia feel a little relieved. She continued, our ship accidentally broke into the storm, and Evelyn suddenly ran away, spreading fungi in the ship, causing the crew to be infected. Another guardian died, and the ship exploded and ran aground due to no control. What about you? How did you survive? Although Steve had already made a judgment in his heart, he still asked this question as usual. He sensed the other party's regret from the other party's active admission of the Alliance agent's identity and the tone of his subsequent speech, so he deliberately asked this to see if the other party would hide it. Mia didn't know that the fungus in her body had been cleared, and a layer of haze appeared in her eyes. She was worried that Evelyn could spy on what she said. But after she woke up, she was not mentally attacked by Evelyn. Maybe the other party temporarily relaxed her surveillance. When she thought of this, she sorted out her mood a little and said, Evelyn is a little girl. Although she also has emotions, the Alliance created and cultivated her according to the standards of biological weapons, so her psychology is distorted and she is keen to form a family with strangers. Hearing this, Giovanni interrupted and said, she is just a little girl, how can you do this? Mia answered firmly, you can't treat her as a little girl. She is a demon. She told the story of Evelyn infecting other researchers to play house with her. That is also a demon you cultivated. Giovanni was very angry. His fatherly love was overflowing. Steve interrupted the quarrel between the two and said, stop arguing. Mia, go on. Mia took a deep breath and said, I already know that I did something wrong. Back to the previous question, I was also infected with E. fungus by her, but because Evelyn regarded me as her mother, the fungal infection in my body did not develop quickly, and I was able to maintain my rationality, and I also had a certain body self-healing ability. It can be said that if she had not been infected with the biochemical fungus, she would have been torn apart by the storm. Then, she made her request, I hope you can help to eliminate this demon together. In order to prevent Evelyn from losing control, our organization has developed a serum for this biochemical weapon, but it requires some special materials. Mia said the name of the material and begged Steve and others to believe her and provide help again. Giovanni said, she regarded you as her mother, but you want to kill her. Mia did not respond to the argument with the other party, because the other party had not been tortured by Evelyn, so he would say such words, so it was meaningless to argue in this situation. She looked at Steve, because he was the one who was in charge here. Mom, you actually did this to me, an innocent voice suddenly sounded. The four looked up at the middle of the Annabelle section. A girl in gray and black clothes with disheveled hair was standing on the edge, staring at Mia. Giovanni did not raise his gun, but Steve and Beidel raised their weapons and aimed at each other. I'm not your mother. Mia recalled what the other party had done, and fear spread in her heart. You are. Evelyn's shout was very harsh. She cried hysterically, why don't you want to be my mother? Evelyn had actually been sleeping just now, and she woke up when she sensed that Mia had escaped her control. Steve did not waver in his heart. He whispered through the internal communication, Beidel, pay attention to Mia's movements. Giovanni and I will attack the enemy together. Giovanni was stunned, but still raised his weapon in his hand, and his eyes became more determined. He is a professional soldier. No matter what he thinks in his heart, he has to be cold-blooded for the safety of his teammates. Mia is still arguing with Evelyn. Steve and Giovanni shot at Evelyn at the same time. The bullets instantly enveloped Evelyn and instantly turned her into a hornet's nest. Evelyn fell backwards, and Steve and the others lost their shooting angle. But just because the bullets can't hit her doesn't mean that the grenades that can be thrown can't hit her. Steve used the grenade launcher installed under the assault rifle to shoot an incendiary bomb. Evelyn was not killed by the bullets, and she wailed in the flames. But it didn't last long, and the sound disappeared, and the original flames were replaced by thick smoke. It should be extinguished by the enemy using other means. Steve glanced at Giovanni. Although the other party shot decisively, he should have fired a grenade after firing the incendiary grenade to ensure that the enemy's position was covered. But since he had hit the enemy, it was understandable that Giovanni didn't fire a second round, so he didn't say much. Did you kill the enemy? Beidel didn't participate in the attack, and Mia didn't run away, so he asked the other party directly. Mia shook her head and said, I don't think she can be killed so easily, otherwise she would have been killed by the fire caused by the explosion when the ship exploded. Steve nodded and said, Beidel and I will go up to chase the enemy. Giovanni, you take Mia to meet up with the support troops, and then get Evelyn's information as soon as possible. he was still a little worried about Giovanni's current state. Giovanni opened his mouth and finally nodded to indicate that he had received it. However, Evelyn would not let Mia leave so easily. The black fungal carpet covering the ship and the surrounding areas was crawling everywhere, and then a black humanoid monster roared and crawled out from it. Steve and his friends would naturally not watch the monster come out and do nothing, and immediately opened fire when the enemy appeared. And they were in the position where they were surrounded by the enemy. So Steve also ordered at the same time, let's get rid of the enemy's encirclement first. Because Mia was in control of important intelligence, the three of them protected her and retreated in the middle, in an orderly manner without any chaos. These enemies that appeared were about 2 meters tall, all with sharp claws and teeth, and covered with mycelium. Although bullets could cause damage to them, the helmet analyzed that the wounds were quickly repaired. But just like the theorem of the biochemical crisis, attacking their heads could turn these monsters into a pool of black water. This prevented the guns in their hands from becoming fire sticks. Steve was relieved. It would be best to solve it with bullets, otherwise he would have to use the few incendiary grenades he brought. "Captain, we're here." Just as Steve led people out of the enemy's encirclement, the support team contacted. Steve immediately told the current situation, and the support team soldiers immediately deployed upon hearing the order, and were about to join the battle to eliminate those monsters one by one. But at this moment, a huge voice suddenly broke through the sky. "You can't take my mother away." Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 608. Give my mother back. Two roars confirmed the fact that Evelyn was still alive. The two broken halves of the hull began to vibrate violently, and the fungal blanket that had grown and spread around the Annabelle began to shrink back. A huge monster rose from the ground, and the face hidden in the center was exactly Evelyn's. The countless tentacles on the huge monster were waving wantonly, and the broken Annabelle became its base. Biochemical monsters were constantly hatched by it, and then they charged towards the BSAT and others. Steve fired a gun and immediately said after meeting with the support captain, "What is the ground condition where you came from? Can the armored vehicle be driven in?" "No, it's all bad roads. If you don't follow the path, it's easy to get stuck in the mud, but the road width is limited. The armored vehicle also has good off-road capabilities, but the road conditions here are too bad, so the support captain can't guarantee it." Steve's face was solemn, and the helicopter they took before was not equipped with weapons. That is to say, for the time being, they can only rely on their flesh and blood to fight the behemoth. Others also knew that something was wrong. Without any hesitation or waiting for orders, the support soldiers took out the individual rocket launchers behind them. Incendiary grenades and fragmentation rockets were fired at the mutated Evelyn, blowing her flesh and blood. But she did not surrender, waving her tentacles to smash the BSA soldiers. The monsters bred on the ground also launched a charge, forcing them to allocate some manpower to specifically eliminate these monsters. Steve did not join the battle, but issued various instructions. Although the previous helicopter did not carry weapons, it could still bring a few electromagnetic gun soldiers to snipe the enemy's exposed weaknesses. They did not use the electromagnetic gun now, not because of the charging time, but because the enemy was too huge and the weakness was unknown, so it was not time for the electromagnetic gun to appear. At the same time, the helicopter can also fly 360 degrees around the enemy to confirm whether there are any enemy weaknesses in their blind spots. After arranging the plane, he did not forget to let the ground troops take rubber boats to the water to send more support soldiers to strengthen firepower. The two sides fought fiercely. Evelyn's tentacles are limited in length, and certainly cannot match the attack range of bullets and rockets. Steve has already ordered to withdraw from the enemy's attack range. But there were still casualties on the BSA side, no light or serious injuries, and 8 soldiers died in the battle. More support soldiers joined the battle, and Evelyn was not feeling well. Compared with bullets, the flames hurt her more, and the mucus she secreted was used to extinguish the flames before. In fact, the flames were extinguished mainly because there was too much mucus to isolate the air, otherwise it would not be so easy to extinguish the flames created by the incendiary grenades with just mucus or water. Evelyn did not go to school, so she naturally did not know the principle of fire extinguishing, so no matter how she secreted mucus this time, she could not completely extinguish the raging flames burning on the surface of her body. Because BSA came much earlier than the game, the reproduction speed of biochemical fungi was obviously much slower than that of biochemical viruses, so Evelyn could not control many biochemical fungi, and this burn made her previous efforts go to waste. But she would not give up or run away. Evelyn mutated again, this time her body shrunk to the size of a truck, and she also got rid of her restraints and grew 8 legs to move, which looked very strange. Focus fire, Steve gave the order the moment the enemy came out. The enemy had legs, either to escape or to fight back. They had been hundreds of meters away before, so Steve was more afraid that the enemy would run away directly than to worry about the enemy rushing towards him. If the enemy escaped into the sea, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Evelyn was huge before, and the BSA support team had only 24 people, so they could only cover the enemy's body as much as possible to confirm the enemy's weak points. But now Evelyn has shrunk in size, and the distorted face that was hidden before has also been revealed. So BSA and others can concentrate their firepower to hit the enemy's face. Evelyn kept her eyes on the BSA, but it was not the enemies like Steve, but Mia who was protected. The flames of the flames and the smoke from the explosion covered her eyes, making it difficult for her to see Mia clearly. Continuing forward, breaking through the smoke and flames, what she saw was still Mia's terrified expression. But unlike other people who were controlled by her to play the role of parents, Mia was special to Evelyn. Mia had been the guardian responsible for taking care of her since she became conscious. The two of them got along very harmoniously at the beginning, and until now she could not forget the comfortable feeling when Mia combed her hair. Evelyn suddenly went crazy because she wanted to be with Mia forever, because she overheard in bed that she would be separated from Mia after this journey. So even if the flames were burning the biochemical fungi connected to her and the bullets shattered her eyes, she moved forward without hesitation, wanting to be by her mother's side. Steve looked at Evelyn, who was getting weaker and weaker, and threw the gun to Beidel to use, and took out the syringe given to him by Luo Guang and his special dagger. "Cease fire and retreat," he ordered loudly, asking his men who had been holding their positions and watching the monsters getting closer and closer to retreat. Then he took the initiative to rush up alone. "Go," Giovanni pulled Mia, who was shocked, backed away. He and Beidel both knew what their captain was going to do. What the other soldiers, including him, had to do now was to retreat immediately and establish a new front, and cover the captain's retreat when the captain failed. Although Evelyn was weak, she was very determined, and her tentacles swept across. Steve jumped to avoid the attack, and then took a small step back to avoid the vertical tentacles. He swung the short knife and cut off the attacking tentacles like cutting through thorns, and was only 1 meter away from Evelyn's twisted face. "Go to hell," Steve roared and inserted the syringe into the opponent's eyebrows, and the liquid inside was instantly injected into the opponent's body. Mia, who was running backwards, looked back and watched Steve and Evelyn fighting in close combat with fear. She never thought that someone would give up the advantage of guns to fight biological weapons. Suddenly, white spots appeared on Evelyn, who was mainly black, as if she had contracted a skin disease. "Calcification," Mia stopped. "What is calcification?" Beidel immediately asked Mia what this meant. "When this biochemical fungus dies, calcification will occur, but how is this possible? What methods did you use?" Mia was extremely surprised by what she saw after waking up, especially the combat ability of BSA, which was even more difficult for her to understand. She couldn't help but wonder if her organization was so bold that it dared to go against the other organization. After Steve finished the injection, he immediately retreated and quickly reunited with his teammates, asking Mia what the enemy was like. Mia answered the question of calcification again and asked Steve how he did it. After all, the Alliance should be the organization that studies biochemical fungi the most deeply. BSA shouldn't have developed a targeted serum so quickly, right? Steve naturally wouldn't tell Mia, the Alliance agent, about the research of the Janang and Gims. Since their target Evelyn had been eliminated, the remaining things to deal with would be much simpler. Luo Guan came to a strange space at this time. It was pitch dark around him, and there was also a cold feeling. Click. A lock-unlocking sound suddenly sounded, and then he found that a door slowly opened in the darkness not far away. There was a gentle light behind the door. Luo Guan could not see the situation behind it, but it seemed to be a ray of light in the darkness, attracting people to go forward. Luo Guan snorted coldly, built up his mental defense, and then walked over and stepped into the light. Noisy sounds came into his ears, and the door of the Raccoon City Police Department was right in front of him. Luo Guan ignored the zombies around him and said to himself, "Everything here feels very real, including the smell." He punched the head of the innocent little zombie next to him and finished his words, "and the touch." Luo Guan was naturally not returning to the past, nor was he traveling again. His body was still working in the BSA headquarters office in Terra Grigia City. Luo Guan in Raccoon City was only a part of his mental power. He still remembered how he came to that black space. After Steve injected the Shinra virus into Evelyn's body, Luo Guan controlled the Shinra virus to eliminate the biochemical fungi and began to analyze the characteristics of the fungi in her body. At the same time, he also discovered one thing, that is, Evelyn had spiritual power, and when she was about to die, this spiritual power turned into a meteor and flew eastward. Luo Guan chased after her relentlessly, tracking all the way, and suddenly came to that black space. However, he still knew the end point. The place where Evelyn stopped was the area where Jack and Shirley were carrying out the mission. He didn't care so much for the time being, and controlled the spiritual power clone to smash the door of the Raccoon City Police Department. However, when he stepped in, the scene in front of him changed instantly, and he came to a warm apartment. "Dad," a girl with twin ponytails ran out of the corridor on the side and threw herself on Luo Guan. When Steve and his team took a helicopter to the place where the Annabelle ran aground, Jack and his team came to the only village in the destination mountain area. Perhaps because it had just snowed, they didn't see any figures. Jack and Shirley discussed for a while and decided to ask the villagers first, so they walked to the room closest to the path into the village. It was a two-story house. Although the gate of the courtyard outside was locked, the two people had special skills and easily climbed over the wall to enter. However, just when they landed, the door of the house was opened, and a big man with a double-barreled shotgun walked out. He didn't shout, but raised his gun and aimed at the two people. 2 bullets were fired, but there was only one gunshot. The double-barreled shotgun fell to the ground. Shirley and Jack fired at the same time and shot down the enemy's gun. The man shrank and was startled. He didn't intend to shoot just now, but just wanted to scare the two people who broke in. You are. Psat, Jack took out his ID, and Shirley raised his gun to stay alert. In addition to Psat, the two also served in the GIMS unit. The tall and strong man cried when he heard this and said, "You are finally here." "Hamas, who's here?" An old woman in a mink coat came out. Behind her were several people holding various farm tools, all of whom came out after hearing the gunshots. Jack revealed his identity again. The old woman showed a happy expression on her face, and just as she was about to speak, she heard a wolf howl. Her and the others' faces changed. "Come in and talk." The old woman looked at the courtyard gate and saw that it was not pried open, and she invited Jack and the others. Shirley put down the gun, nodded to Jack, and then followed him in. The big man who had the gun at the beginning looked around, picked up the double-barreled shotgun on the ground, and then closed the door and went into the house. The house was not too big, only 70 or 80 square meters, but there were many people in it. Jack just counted the people in the room and there were nearly 10 people. But from their appearance and whispers, these people were not a family, but villagers. The representative of these people was the old woman. What happened here? Please explain the situation from the beginning. Jack sat down and asked. They did not come here because they received any distress signal. But from the words of the crying big man, he realized that these people had asked Psa for help, but he didn't know why Psa did not receive the distress signal. In order to understand the whole thing clearly, he deliberately asked the other party to explain it from the beginning. The old woman did not notice the problem, because the two people on the other side were the lifeline of them. About a week ago, a werewolf appeared in the village. Jack and Shirley took off their helmets temporarily and looked at each other. Aren't werewolves creatures in legends? Although they felt strange in their hearts, they did not interrupt each other and continued to listen patiently. At first we all thought it was the children who were naughty, but soon the chickens, ducks, geese, and other animals we raised disappeared inexplicably, leaving only feathers and blood on the ground. At this point, the faces of the people around showed expressions of fear. In this case, we have to be afraid, so we went to the four nobles to discuss the situation, but we were turned away. The old woman was a little angry in her tone, drank a sip of water, and slammed the cup heavily on the table. Shirley took the opportunity to ask the other party while he was drinking water, four nobles. They are the nobles who rule our village, literally. Jack asked, where do they live? Where did they go? The old woman replied, Dimitrescu Castle, Moro Reservoir, Heisenberg Factory, and Foggy Valley. The people of the four major families live in these places respectively, but we sent people to look for them but couldn't find the people of the four nobles, nor could we find them. Shirley nodded, wrote down the information, and said, go on. The old woman nodded and continued, if they are not here, we can't just sit and wait for death, or do nothing. After all, there is a problem with the livestock, which has a great impact on our lives and tribute. Werewolves have only appeared recently, but vampires have existed for a long time. So we organized a patrol team to patrol at night. The old woman paused and told what happened that night. The werewolf really appeared. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 609. After listening to the old woman's words about the patrol team, Jack asked, what's the situation with the werewolves? Who saw the werewolves? The old woman shook her head and said, that person has been killed by the werewolves. She then told the situation of the werewolves, but we also know a general situation of the werewolves. After all, we have been hiding from them for a long time. Jack and Shirley learned a lot about those monsters from each other's words. These werewolves are basically transformed from villagers. They are strong and walk upright. Their lips disappear, revealing bloody fangs and gums. They have high intelligence and use various tools as weapons to attack other villagers. Although the specific reason is unknown, as long as the victim is bitten by a werewolf or cut by the other party's claws, the victim will also become a werewolf. The first reaction of Jack and Shirley after hearing these words is that these werewolves may also be zombies. The old woman sighed and said, alas, after the patrol confirmed the existence of the werewolf, we also took many self-rescue measures. For example, we used a radio to call for help on your rescue channel, but there was no response. We were about to give up, but fortunately you came. Jack thought of something and asked, aren't you going to escape? The old woman shook her head and said, where should we escape? This is our hometown, and as long as we leave here, we will be discovered by monsters in minutes. She also thought of something and asked, by the way, didn't you encounter those monsters when you came in? Jack shook his head, and Shirley recorded the village's events and sent them to the online database. This area can only be connected by satellite signals, and satellite signals cannot be received in the house under normal circumstances. However, when the two found that there was no signal when they entered the village, they set up a signal relay station with a mobile battery at the entrance of the village, so Shirley could send the request for support through that relay station. Jack was about to ask in detail when a loud noise suddenly came from the house. Other civilians, including the old woman, turned pale. One of them said with trembling lips, "Werewolves are coming, they must have been attracted by the gunshots before." Jack and Shirley put on their helmets and said, "Let's go check it out. You gather together and wait for our news." The old woman didn't tell the two to protect them here. She just nodded and told them how to go to the area where the noise was made, and then began to arrange other people. Jack and Shirley carefully moved forward in the room with short assault rifles. They walked in silence towards the place where the sundries were stored at the other end of the room. "Be careful," Jack pounced and threw Shirley to the ground. He didn't suddenly become a werewolf, but heard footsteps behind the door of the sundries room. Almost at the moment he threw Shirley, the door broke into pieces and a werewolf rushed out. Jack stood up with one hand and raised the assault rifle with the other hand to shoot. However, there was another loud noise, and the werewolf directly broke through the wall and entered the living room on the other side. Jack snorted and chased after him with Shirley. The werewolf was very cunning and insidious. It didn't actually run far. It ran into the wall and hid against the wall after entering the house. It attacked when the two broke in, and opened its bloody mouth to bite Jack, who came in first. The cautious Jack was still startled by the sudden attack, but after years of training, he could already launch a counter-attack like a conditioned reflex. He punched and knocked the werewolf's teeth off. The werewolf was stunned by the punch, covered his mouth, and retreated several steps. Gunshots rang out. Jack took advantage of the victory and immediately shot, and the werewolf was successfully solved. Jack looked at the werewolf, who fell to the ground and lost his life reaction, and exhaled. He was really scared just now. However, before he could say anything, more sounds of breaking doors and walls rang out, this time from all directions, and it was obvious that more werewolves appeared. "I'll deal with the invading monsters." Jack's first reaction was to eliminate the enemy. "I'll go find the survivors." Shirley's first reaction was to protect civilians. Jack and Shirley both spoke out their next plans at the same time. Although they had different opinions, they did not argue about it. After many battles together, they were very familiar with each other's personalities and work styles, so they used I instead of we when they spoke before. After both sides said in unison to be careful, they immediately separated. That strange spiritual space. The smiling Evelyn was about to pounce on Luo Guang, but Luo Guang dodged and Evelyn hit the door panel behind her. Evelyn burst into tears, and the heart-wrenching cry was hard for sympathetic people to ignore. However, Luo Guang still looked indifferent, and even felt a little funny and said, "Evelyn, put away your fake crying. You can't fool me with this trick." The crying stopped all of a sudden, and Evelyn stared at Luo Guang with her eyes full of resentment and bloodshot, and said, "Why?" She was actually more mature than her peers, and knew that her young appearance was a weapon to gain the love of others. Luo Guang knew what the other party was asking, and said, "Because I'm not your father, there's no need for me to spoil you." "I'm not asking you that. Why can't I have my own father and mother? You should ask the Alliance instead of me." Luo Guang would not clean up the enemy's ass, and said, "Also, it's you who messed up your parents every time. Not to mention how many people Evelyn infected as her parents during the Research Institute period. What was the result? Those people were all infected with biochemical fungi and died. But Evelyn would not feel sad about it. She would only work harder to infect other people to be her parents. In other words, the so-called parents before were just her consumables, and there was no affection between them at all. To say something irresponsible, Although Evelyn suffered a lot of inhuman torture, this was not a reason for her to hurt innocent people. Evelyn kept shaking her head like a rattle, denying Luo Guang's words, and said, "They didn't want to be my parents, so I satisfied their wish for liberation. It's all just an excuse. There are many adoptive families in the world, and the adopted children and adoptive parents have no blood relationship, but they have also become families with good relationships. Evelyn's values have long been distorted and formed, and it is not something that can be persuaded by mouth cannons." Luo Guang was too lazy to discuss this and said, "What is this space all about? Do you know?" Evelyn felt that the other party was a little shameless. He didn't want to be her father and kept mocking her. Now he had the nerve to ask her questions. So she turned her head away and ignored Luo Guang. Luo Guang wandered around in this strange room. All the furniture and items were very real. The TV could be turned on, but he checked the program on it with his main body and found that it was an old program. In the process, he noticed one thing. That is, there was an increasingly strong pressure around him that was oppressing his spiritual power clone, just like he was rejected by the world and wanted to exclude himself from the spiritual space. In addition, he continued to analyze the entire space. Luo Guang returned to the door. Evelyn was no longer here. He pushed open the door to leave the room. The scene behind him was not the entrance of the Raccoon City Police Department, but a long corridor with children's paintings on both sides. He did not hesitate or fear, nor did he follow the other party's ideas, but gathered more spiritual power. As his spiritual power body became more and more spiritual, the pressure of this spiritual space on him became greater and greater. Luo Guang laughed. The owner of the spiritual space was obviously helpless against him. Apart from oppression, he had no means of attack. After concentrating more mental power, he was ready to do something big. Luo Guang waved his hands, and the corridor in front of him was like being blown by a strong wind. The wooden floor and hanging paintings were all blown away. The bright electric light flashed and exploded directly, and the corridor fell into darkness. That's not enough. An invisible sledgehammer appeared in Luo Guang's hand. He was ready to demolish the house. 80. With one hammer, a big hole was smashed directly into the wall. Behind the wall was pitch black, but this was not another room, but the same dark space that Luo Guang had seen. Stop, Luo Guang had only smashed 2 holes, and Evelyn couldn't stand it anymore. She appeared at the end of the corridor with her head covered. "I found you, a naughty ghost." Luo Guang's eyes were shining, and he rushed over. His mental power imprisoned the space around Evelyn, preventing her from escaping. Evelyn's legs suddenly left the ground and were clamped by Luo Guang's waist, her eyes full of panic. "What are you going to do?" Luo Guang smiled and said, "The action against you is called spanking action. What do you think I want to do now?" Akina Dimitrescu, the owner of Dimitrescu Castle, was waiting for the arrival of the last participant in the conference room. In addition to her, there were 3 other participants, namely Carl Heisenberg, Salvador Moro, and Donna Benevento. The door was forcibly pushed open, and Heisenberg, carrying a sledgehammer, walked in and sat in the last empty seat. With a thump, the sledgehammer was casually placed on the ground by him, causing displeasure to the owner of the castle. However, the city lord Dimitrescu did not waste words and went straight to the point. "Since Heisenberg is here, I will tell everyone the order of the Mother Goddess." Benevento was silent and did not respond, but the doll in the wedding dress in his hand nodded slightly. Moro, who seemed to have rickets, covered his strange appearance with a cloth robe and did not respond. The last Heisenberg sat with his legs crossed, looking bored, without any response. Although Dimitrescu and the others were called the Four Nobles, she felt that she was superior to the other 3 and was unhappy with Heisenberg's attitude. But now the Mother Goddess's order was important, so she did not get angry. The Mother Goddess said that an enemy broke into the village and asked us to destroy the enemy. Because we don't know where the enemy's target is, we must be prepared in each area. Morrow couldn't nod because of his physical condition, so he could only wave his hand to show that he understood. Heisenberg said impatiently, "Are there many enemies?" "2. Just for this little thing, you called us to a meeting? Can't you just send a servant to notify us?" Heisenberg felt that the other party was making a fuss, using chicken feathers as a command arrow, and using this matter to show off his power. Dimitris maintained his noble demeanor, but he did not suffer any loss. He said, "Since you know about this, do it quickly. Don't complain here. Do you dare to tell the Mother Goddess if you are dissatisfied?" Heisenberg sneered and did not move. He said, "There are only 2 enemies and they have entered the village. That is your responsibility. Don't tell me you can't deal with them." Dimitris answered irrelevantly and replied, "The Mother Goddess has her own arrangements. Just do it quickly." She was actually hit on the mark. In fact, the Mother Goddess only ordered her to eliminate the enemy. She didn't ask for help from others. She had already sent the werewolf troops in the village to deal with the 2 ants who stepped into her land. The reason why Dimitris summoned others to come over, in addition to showing off her big name, was to show off to others after she eliminated the enemy, saying that she was different from the other 3. Boring Heisenberg got up and left with the sledgehammer again. He had seen the other party's tricks and was too lazy to continue arguing with the other party. It would be better to go back and continue studying the cyborg mutants. Morrow and Benevento also stood up and left without saying goodbye. The displeasure on Dimitri's face turned into anger. He raised his right hand with claws. The sharp nails suddenly grew and pierced the chair where Heisenberg had sat. The house where Jack and Shirley were was surrounded by werewolves. The enemies broke into the room from all directions and massacred the people inside. Shirley couldn't fight 4 punches with both hands. Even though she had rushed back to the room where the old lady was, there were many werewolves, and the survivors were in chaos, so she couldn't eliminate the enemies who broke in at the first time. When Jack found that something was wrong and turned back to find Shirley, the old lady and other survivors had all died. The 2 of them broke out of the siege and came to the outside of the house. The house seemed to be unable to withstand their destruction and collapsed in a short while. Before Jack could catch his breath, he asked, "When will the support arrive?" Shirley did the same, and said the information on the helmet, "It is estimated that the helicopter support will arrive in 2 hours." Then she asked, "What are your plans?" Jack had already thought of what to do next, and said, "We will clear the enemies in the village and look for survivors while heading towards the castle. The final boss is usually in the castle." Shirley watched the old woman and the others die, so she did not respond to Jack's joke and said, "Okay, let's go now." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 610. Chapter 610. As the title says, I'm stuck. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 611. Shirley and Jack left the old woman's house and went deeper into the village according to the plan. Soon, several large werewolves with steel blades tied to their hands and hoods on their heads, which were larger than ordinary werewolves, appeared in front of them. These werewolves could not understand trash talk, so the 2 sides did not talk nonsense and the battle started directly. Shirley and Jack did not act separately to form crossfire to attack the enemy. Because the number of enemies was much larger than theirs, if the 2 acted separately, they would only be defeated one by these local wolves. After all, Jack and Shirley's combat effectiveness was far inferior to Luo Guang's, and they did not have the ability to defeat thousands of enemies with one person. Luo Guang did not upgrade the virus in their bodies, but their current combat effectiveness was still much stronger than in the game. As soon as the gunshot rang out, one of the large werewolves fell to the ground. The enemy's mask blocked the part above the mouth, and the eyes were not open, so they should track the enemy by sound. Shirley was much shorter than this kind of enemy, so if she fired, the bullet could be shot diagonally from top to bottom into the enemy's brain, killing him in one shot. Jack on the other side took a fancy to a stone bungalow and wanted to use the terrain to separate the enemy. He ran over there and shot at the knees of the large werewolf that tried to surround him, making it impossible for the enemy to complete the encirclement. Shirley, who was following behind, did not have to be responsible for blocking the enemy, but focused on destroying the enemy, leaving the matter of clearing the way to Jack. But just when Jack and Shirley were about to enter the room, a huge beast pounced down, smashed the stone house in one go, and then directly hit Jack and Shirley behind him. "Go right." While Jack reminded Shirley, he also pounced to the right. Shirley reacted quickly, followed Jack's movements to pounce to the right, rolled, and then stood up. She immediately confirmed the appearance of the new enemy. If the previous one was a werewolf, then the one that just hit was a mutant wolf. Looking closely, it was found that the monster had a human face. That's right, this new enemy is also a kind of biochemical werewolf. The castle lord Dimitrescu was furious when he sensed that the ordinary werewolves he sent out were easily solved by the enemy. The village population is limited, and people's awareness of anti-biochemical crisis has been strengthened, so she can't create a large number of werewolves at all, so now every werewolf is very precious and an important barrier to protect the mother goddess. But now she has suffered heavy losses from only 2 enemies, so she is naturally furious and no longer underestimates the enemy. She decided to send all the werewolves to destroy the enemy directly. In addition to this mutant wolf, a giant werewolf holding a giant hammer in both hands appeared on the cliff not far away, looking down silently. Jack and Shirley, who avoided the attack of the mutant wolf, immediately counterattacked, and the bullets chased the reckless mutant wolf and hit the enemy's buttocks. Other large werewolves came and Jack and Shirley were surrounded. It is best to avoid being surrounded, but they have also done combat training after being surrounded, so the two did not panic. Shirley pulled the safety ring of the smoke bomb in her hand and threw it to the ground. The smoke was everywhere, but it had no effect on Jack and Shirley, because they were wearing helmets with multiple functions and had a way to detect enemies in the smoke. BSA also considered fighting human enemies, so the smoke bombs they used could block thermal imaging detection. Therefore, Shirley and the others used the radar emitted by the helmet to create a 3D image of the surrounding environment. This technology can confirm the situation inside to a certain extent through the smoke. Although the distance was not too far, it was enough for the two to be the evil ghosts in the smoke, eliminate the large werewolves approaching, and escape from the encirclement. After leaving the encirclement, the two had already replaced the new magazine. The mutant wolf with a particularly sensitive nose tracked them, opened its bloody mouth, and raised its claws to attack Shirley. Jack noticed the enemy's attack and turned around. Shirley bumped into his arms and avoided Jack's gun line. Jack had no time to feel the soft Shirley in his arms, and shot the bullet into the bloody mouth of the mutant wolf, solving the enemy. There was no time for the two to hug each other. After dealing with the mutant wolf, they immediately separated and continued to run and fight. Luo Guang's spanking plan was a great success. Evelyn's butt was spanked red and her eyes were full of tears. This time it was not an act. She was really beaten to tears by Luo Guang. But no matter how she begged for mercy, Luo Guang did not stop and directly slapped Evelyn's spirit body apart. Unexpectedly, after Evelyn was completely destroyed by him, the entire space collapsed. In the blink of an eye, he returned to the door of the Raccoon City Police Department. After such a back and forth, Luo Guang finally figured out what this spiritual space was. Everyone has his own exclusive space. Evelyn's exclusive space is a warm home, while Luo Guang's space is Raccoon City in the disaster. As for the dark space where Luo Guang was before and now, it was actually a passage between various spaces. Each space is a grid, arranged like a honeycomb. After Evelyn's space was destroyed, he returned to his own space. After Luo Guang thought about it, he came up with a plan. Although he didn't know how to go to other spaces through normal means, it might be related to the way he went to Evelyn's space, which was to find a door to go in. But I don't know if it has something to do with the size of his mental power. Luo Guang's mental space is not small. The whole Raccoon City is so big, and there are so many doors that it's hard to find them. So he might as well just smash the wall of his mental space and go to other nearby spaces. But just when Luo Guang was about to smash the air wall outside Raccoon City, a hole suddenly appeared in the air wall, and it was pitch black inside. It seemed that this mental space was still under his control. Next, he only needed to confirm which direction had a stronger sense of oppression, and he could follow the clues to move towards the center of the enemy. As he went deeper, the enemy's mother goddess also noticed Luo Guang's existence. Originally, she just thought that there was a poor guy who died from the infection of biochemical fungi, and then the remaining consciousness returned to the group nest consciousness. However, now she knew that the person who came was not kind, and she needed to focus all her attention on this matter, so she decided to leave the affairs of the village to the four nobles. Shirley and Jack were surrounded again. The two used the same trick again, but Jack almost died. The giant werewolf holding a giant hammer jumped directly from the cliff and raised the giant hammer to smash the middle of the smoke. Jack was lucky. The hammer didn't hit him, but it also hit the large werewolf in front of him, splashing blood all over him. Not only that, the smoke in the middle was blown away instantly, including the smoking smoke grenade. Jack wiped the blood off the mask with one hand. Although the Psi helmet's mask does not have a wiper function, it is also considered that it has been specially treated to prevent water. Therefore, he wiped off the flesh and blood on the mask with one wipe. At the same time, he held the trigger with his other hand and poured out all the bullets to delay the enemy's next attack. He took this opportunity to immediately retreat and successfully avoided the enemy's next sweeping attack. Shirley was dealing with other enemies, but she couldn't support Jack, so she had to rely on Jack himself. Jack took a deep breath. He was not afraid of fighting against the giant werewolf alone, but the enemies around him were eyeing him covetously, which distracted him from other enemies. He avoided the enemy's attack, replaced the magazine of the weapon in his hand, paid attention to the movement around him, and his brain turned quickly in the hope of finding a way out. He threw the smoke bomb again to create smoke, but it was blown away by the giant werewolf's hammer along with the smoke bomb. But Jack took this opportunity to take out the shock flash bomb and threw it directly at the enemy's face. Although the light caused by the shock flash bomb would damage some optical instruments of the helmet, Jack chose to use it directly after thinking about it. He and Shirley used the black screen of the mask and the noise reduction effect of the headphones to reduce the impact of the shock flash bomb, allowing them to find a gap for counterattack. Luo Guang's clone saw all this. Although Jack and the others finally found a way out, it could only slightly ease their danger. Because the equipment and weapons they carried were limited. Among them, the most carried were bullets instead of various throwing objects, and they did not carry electromagnetic guns, which were difficult to carry. But Luo Guang did not let the clone go over to help immediately, but just moved closer to the two people, ready to rescue them at any time. Bang! Shirley was knocked away by the mutant wolf that suddenly appeared and crashed into the house on the other side. The large werewolf immediately followed and rushed into the room, wanting to kill her while she was sick. Shirley, Jack panicked, and his movements lost their previous naturalness and agility, and he was a beat slower. At this time, he was at the critical moment of avoiding the attack of the giant hammer. As a result, he was panicked because of Shirley's matter, and there was no time for him to do other evasive actions, so he could only jump up to avoid it. The next second, he was tightly held in the hand of the giant werewolf with a flexibility that did not match his body size with his thick arms. Jack spit out a mouthful of blood, and he felt that his internal organs were about to be crushed. Fortunately, the quality of Bz's weapons was good, which shared some of his strength, and his own physical strength was not bad, so he did not squeeze out the shit. Despite this, he was already in a dead end and could not break free at all. The combat power of the two is naturally much stronger than that of Ethan, the humanoid fungus beast controlled by the player who passed the level without any damage, but the number and strength of the enemies Ethan faced were far less than those encountered by Jack and his partner, so the two were at a disadvantage and faced a life and death crisis. The giant werewolf wanted to put down the giant hammer and crush the small insect in his hand with both arms. As a result, a beam of light was emitted from the room where Shirley crashed into, and directly wiped out the head of the giant werewolf. Jack was very surprised, but he didn't waste time. He didn't want to be crushed by the giant werewolf. He immediately broke free from his restraints, landed away from the giant werewolf, and then looked back in the direction of the electromagnetic catapult, and saw Shirley and a familiar figure walking out of the dilapidated house. The werewolves around the house had fallen to the ground and lost their lives. Uncle Ficado, Jack ran over and asked, "Shirley, are you okay?" Shirley rubbed her chest and said, "No, I'm fine now." She turned her head to look at Ficado's clone and asked, "By the way, Uncle Ficado, did the commander ask you to come?" She and Jack both thought of this without thinking too much. Luo Guang must have sent Ficado to protect them secretly. Luo Guang naturally couldn't admit this, otherwise what would happen if Jack and the others became dependent on each other in the future? So he controlled the clone to answer, "No, I came here for another matter." "Report the situation." Yes, saluting is not popular on the battlefield, so Jack then told what they encountered after entering the village. Shirley added, "The support will arrive in about half an hour." Luo Guang still remembered that he asked the two to exercise, and controlled the Ficado clone to nod and said, "In this case, I won't bother you. I'll go ahead and wait for you in the castle." He underestimated the difficulty of this mission, otherwise he would definitely send a few more people to perform the mission with Jack and the others, so he would help the two to reduce the difficulty. Jack and Shirley also knew that this was Luo Guang's test for them, so they didn't keep him and said that they would catch up with him soon. Since the clones have appeared, Luo Guang didn't hesitate to suppress his inner desires. While he was destroying the mysterious spiritual space, he controlled the Ficado clone to kill the castle. Although the Falcado clone can directly climb from the outer perimeter of the castle to the top floor of the castle, according to the law of Castlevania, the boss is usually in the center of the castle. So he kicked the rock-hard door open with one foot. This seemed to alarm the enemies on the top of the castle. They spread their huge wings that were mutated from their arms, fell from the sky, and killed the Falcado clone. However, these enemies were weak and not as fast as the clone, so they were shot and fell from the air when they dived down. After the Falcado clone eliminated the enemies on guard outside, he entered the castle. The owner of the castle, Dimitrescu, was very hospitable and immediately sent her servants out to greet him. However, these servants were of low intelligence and slow movement. They used medieval swords and claws to attack, which was more symbolic than practical. Although there were many people, they could not stop the clone's pace at all. Dimitrescu could only send her 3 beautiful daughters to stop the Falcado clone. In fact, the 3 daughters are also biochemical monsters, composed of infected special flies, which can imitate human form and express their own emotions. After the 3 bullets of Ficado's clone failed to kill the 3 enemies, he noticed this after a careful observation, so he directly shot a lightning bolt covering the entire room, instantly burning all the flies into charcoal. There is no surveillance here, so he is naturally not afraid of being discovered by the 2-meter-9 tall Dimitrescu. Without waiting for Dimitrescu to find the remains of his daughters, Luo Guang controlled the clone to quickly find the furious Dimitrescu. He moved his palms and said to the plump and tall figure in front of him, "Let me see if it is as elastic as in the game." Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 612. Outside the castle. After the two of them dealt with the subsequent enemies, they did not immediately set out to chase the Fukado clone. After fighting all the way, the two were a little tired, so Jack suggested taking a break before the new enemies came. Shirley, who was covered in blood, sorted out her belongings and asked, "Is it really okay for us to rest here? You are tired from the battle just now, right?" Jack and Shirley were both injured, but because both of them had the biochemical virus in their bodies, they had healed themselves. "Yes, but Uncle Fukado is unfathomable. I am worried that if we take a break, he will clean up the castle." Shirley felt that she was being lazy, which was a little unusual for her diligence. Jack replied, "Our goal is to find Miranda and deal with the biochemical crisis here. The former is the purpose of their coming here, and the latter is the task automatically generated after discovering the biochemical crisis here." Shirley looked strange, "So that's why we have to set off immediately?" Jack shook his head. "It's not that he didn't work hard, but Uncle Fukado was too strong. Even if they set out for the castle now, they could only finish it. Although we got some intelligence after entering the village, we didn't get anything else. We fought all the way and didn't have time to think about other things." He added, "We need some time to think. This is not a linear game. You can't solve the problem and find the truth by going all the way. So in addition to combat ability, thinking ability is also a must for an anti-biochemical warrior." Shirley recalled what she had learned and nodded, "Okay. But the survivors are gone, how can we find clues?" Jack thought for a while and said, "The source of the biochemical crisis is either natural or man-made. The latter is not easy to study, biochemical viruses and the like. At least this medieval village can't have such research conditions." Heisenberg factory, Shirley suddenly realized. Jack nodded and said, "Leave the castle to Uncle Fukado. Let's go to the factory to investigate." While chatting, the two counted the remaining weapons and ammunition on them. Shirley simply said, 98 rifle bullets, 3 fragmentation grenades, and 1 smoke bomb. She still had pistol bullets on her, but as a backup weapon, there were not many spare bullets, so she didn't say it. "I don't have many bullets here, and there are still 2 grenades left for throwing objects." Jack counted and found that he had consumed a lot of weapons and ammunition in the battle just now. However, if Fukado hadn't appeared in time, they would have died here before the bullets were exhausted. He smiled bitterly and said, "It seems that we'd better wait for the support and supplies to come before making plans." Jack is not a stubborn person. Shirley agreed with the other party and said, "You should contact Uncle Fukado first." Fukado quickly answered the phone. Jack was slightly stunned when he heard the rhythmic snapping sounds and the angry curses of a woman's resistance from the other side. Fukado asked, "What's the matter?" "I'm busy." Uncle Fukado, what are you busy with? It seems very exciting." "Don't be so nosy, kid, just get to the point." Luo Guang deliberately controlled the clone to say this. "Anyway, what does Fukado's good deeds have to do with me?" "Yes." Jack suppressed his curiosity and said his thoughts. "Well planned." Fukado's clone praised and said, "You just wait for support before destroying the enemy. Miranda will be left to me." "Eh? Oh, okay." Jack originally wanted to ask about Miranda, but then he thought about it and decided not to ask too much. Because he heard the snapping sounds coming from the other side were getting more and more frequent, like a sprint. Then he told Shirley about Fukado's idea and concealed the matter of the discordant sound. With Fukado's approval, the good child Shirley finally relaxed and rested for a while. The perspective returned to Fukado's clone. "What?" Dimitrescu, who was affectionately called Lady 8-Foot by the players of the Resident Evil game, was stunned when she heard Luo Guang's words bounce or not. Then her huge buttocks felt numb. The Fukado clone controlled by Luo Guang stood behind the other party at some point, and slapped the other party's protruding buttocks with his hand. Considering the other party's physical fitness, he deliberately added some electric current when slapping, so Dimitrescu felt numb. Luo Guang also fulfilled his wish before crossing over and slapped the other party's buttocks in reality. But he felt that the other party's buttocks were not as big as Jill and Ashley, and he couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Although the other party would never age because of mutation, she was already 44 years old when she got this ability, which was out of the scope of youth or even maturity. In addition, that ability was not to make her body rejuvenate, so for the high-demanding Luo Guang, the feel was naturally not good. "You rude fellow," Dimitrescu turned around and swung his claws at the same time, aiming for the head of Fakado's clone. Luo Guang controlled the clone to easily avoid the attack, deliberately sighed loudly, and said, "Alas, this feeling is too disappointing." While speaking, a fly swatter made of hardened armor appeared in his hand. "Since the feel is not good, it is more fun to use a swatter." "Damn bastard," Dimitrescu's face was originally pale, but the clone's behavior and the words that deserved a beating made it look a little red. She attacked the clone again with rage. Snap! The crisp slapping sound rang in the room. Luo Guang controlled the clone to avoid the attack, connected Jack's contact and hit the other party's butt with a fly swatter. Shameful and angry, Dimitrescu felt that the other party was just humiliating her, and waved her claws, making a sound of cutting through the air. Snap! The Fakado clone narrowed his eyes, avoided the opponent's random claw attack, went around the enemy, and slapped again. The damage was not great, but it was extremely insulting. "You!" Snap! This time, without waiting for the opponent's next round of attack, the Fakado clone interrupted the enemy while he was talking. Dimitrescu was filled with anger, and he didn't say anything or insult anymore. He vowed to tear the enemy into pieces. The Fakado clone now held the fly swatter in both hands, and the target was no longer Dimitrescu's buttocks. After all, the convex part of the 8-foot lady is not only the back. For a while, the sound of the clone using the fly swatter to hit the room was endless. Dimitrescu naturally couldn't use all her abilities in this room. With her speed and strength alone, she was no match for the clone. She could only attack randomly, hoping to hit the hateful enemy by chance. However, she soon realized that her attacks were in vain, because the enemy could not be hit by her at all. Luo Guang's slapping force was getting stronger and stronger, bringing Dimitrescu greater pain and humiliation. Later, Dimitrescu, who was high above everyone else and looked down on everyone except the Mother Goddess, could only passively defend herself, protecting herself from the attacks of Falcardo's clones. At the same time, she was filled with fear and humiliation, and she shouted loudly, "Kill me! You can't humiliate a noble like this!" Snap! Falcardo's clone slapped the other's mouth with a fly swatter and stated his purpose, "Where is Miranda?" Dimitrescu was stunned when he heard Falcardo's question after he stopped attacking. Miranda was the name of the 4 noble mother goddesses. Although the mother goddess had told them that there would be enemies coming to them in the near future after she came back, she never expected that the enemy would come so soon and be so powerful. The mother goddess was the one who made her immortal, and the other party's insults to her made Dimitrescu unwilling to tell the other party about Miranda's situation. Just as she was about to divert the enemy to the Heisenberg factory, let Karl Heisenberg fight the enemy in front of him, and she went to inform the mother goddess, the door of the room was pushed open. The servants she called finally arrived. These servants were called vampires by her, and the reason they came now was naturally because they were slow. However, Dimitrescu only needed them to help delay time. As long as she left the castle, she could take out the strongest state to deal with the enemy. The servant raised the sword to attack Luo Guang, and Dimitrescu made a quick decision and chose to escape without diverting the trouble. "Why are you so stupid?" As soon as the voice fell, Falcardo's clone had blocked the door. The heads of the servants slowly slid down and fell to the ground. The 2-meter-tall Dimitrescu's sight suddenly lowered, and it became Falcardo looking down at her. Because Falcardo directly cut the opponent in half. Another parasite? No, in addition to parasites, there is also some kind of biochemical fungus in your body. Luo Guang's sword carries the Shinra virus, and when it hits the enemy, it can naturally infect the enemy. Dimitrescu also felt the war in his body. The most important thing is that the other party actually judged the true face of the gift at a glance. The four nobles, the werewolves in the village, the vampires in the castle, etc. are actually the products of the gift, which was given to them by the mother goddess Miranda. The Ficado clone did not say that he would give the other party a last chance. As long as he controlled the other party, he would naturally have a way to get the information about the location of Miranda's physical body. The physical body is emphasized here because the spiritual body clone controlled by Luo Guang encountered Miranda's spiritual body in the spiritual space. The spirit and physical matter are one, and the destruction of both is considered to be the complete destruction of Miranda. In addition, no matter which side is solved first, it can affect the battle on the other side. So Luo Guang did not give up finding Miranda's physical body in the real world because he met Miranda in the spiritual world, but instead accelerated the progress. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 613. Spiritual World. What a surprise! Luo Guang didn't expect Miranda to come to him directly. This doesn't fit the character of the mastermind. The whole space is a one-to-one replica of the village that Jack and his friends entered. Miranda's spirit body in front of him was wearing clothes woven from black feathers, with a strange mask covering her face, and a silver-black holy belt around her neck. She didn't seem surprised to see Luo Guang's spirit body, and asked back, "I didn't expect that the dignified BSA commander is also a psychic. Where does your psychic power come from?" Miranda's words were a little threatening, and she was actually hinting that Luo Guang was also a biochemical infected person. Luo Guang would not admit or answer the other party's question, saying, "Spiritual power is not a surprising thing. As a cultivator, it is easy to do this." Miranda naturally didn't know what cultivation was. She sneered and decided to make it clear, if people outside knew that the commander of BSA and the hero of the world were actually infected by biochemicals, or even biochemical weapons, I wonder what would happen. Not very good. I have heard a lot of similar rumors. Everyone is used to the saying, and you have no evidence to prove it, right? Luo Guang shrugged his shoulders, his face looked indifferent. In fact, there have been rumors on the internet that Luo Guang's identity is not simple, and his great success is related to his infection with biochemical viruses. Under the guidance of the X organization led by Luo Guang, his former identity of Umbrella Corporation was also brought up. The water army of the X organization also began to exert its strength, talking about the biochemical crises that Luo Guang had solved, shaping his image of turning over a new leaf, etc. Then he led the topic of Luo Guang is actually a biochemical monster to the direction of creating a meme, and soon controlled the direction of public opinion on the internet. He said that everyone is used to saying Luo Guang is a biochemical monster, which is to use memes to make it a bad meme. So now, whenever someone mentions this, others will just think that the other party is playing a cliché and will not take it seriously, thus curbing the spread of this statement. In order to prevent the other party from dwelling on this point, Luo Guang deliberately changed the subject and said, "By the way, has your daughter been resurrected?" In addition to changing the subject, he also wanted to confirm whether the enemy's goal and the game had changed. Miranda, who was originally very calm, suddenly broke down, her expression changed drastically, and she asked angrily, "How did you know about my daughter?" Her daughter Eva died in the Spanish flu from 1918 to 1920. By chance, Miranda discovered the possibility of her daughter's resurrection when she was looking for a place to commit suicide. The key lies in this spiritual space. Luo Guang couldn't answer the other party's question, so he asked back, "What do you think counts as resurrection? Even if you have the same memory, is the person still the same person? Memory in this world can be modified at will, but it is not necessarily true and reliable." He smashed the wall all the way here and found that not every spiritual space has a lively guy like Evelyn. On the contrary, Evelyn is a special case. Other spiritual spaces are like movie theaters, which only play the memories of the people they belong to. Luo Guang has the first research data on the soul in his hand, and he also studied it later. Naturally, he can tell why there is such a difference between the former and the latter, because the soul of the former is still there. Miranda saw her daughter's memory in this spiritual space and thought that this biochemical fungus could help her revive her daughter. So she naturally would not admit that Luo Guang's words were correct, and immediately retorted, "What do you know? I know better than you. Memories can be fabricated and modified. This technology was developed by the Apocalypse organization, and they even studied the soul." Luo Guang was not trying to persuade the other party to put down his butcher knife and become a Buddha on the spot. He was just delaying time so that the Ficado clone had time to go to the location of Miranda's body. This fungus owner is the source of this biochemical crisis incident. Miranda called it Black God. It is a natural super fungus with self-awareness and wisdom. In fact, if Miranda's research had not reached a bottleneck, she would not have gone with the Alliance, an extreme terrorist organization, and naturally would not have been targeted by the BSAT. Speaking of the fungus master, Dimitrescu did not know much about him, and everything related to him was basically controlled by Miranda, so she did not know much. However, Luo Guang still learned from her that this biochemical parasite formed by the assimilation of parasitic nematodes and biochemical fungi was called gift by Miranda, as well as most of the abilities of this biochemical parasite. For him, it was enough. As long as it is confirmed that the situation here and the other party's plan have not changed, and the performance of the biochemical weapons used is basically the same as in the game, then the game settings related to biochemical fungi can correspond to the real situation to a certain extent. Therefore, Luo Guang can finally confirm that he is in the spiritual space server created by the fungus master, and everyone's spiritual space is like every website. When Miranda heard Luo Guang's words, ripples appeared in her heart, and she said directly, "Let's cooperate. As long as you can help me revive my daughter, I am willing to do anything." Her research has been stuck in a bottleneck for a long time. Don't forget your identity, woman. You are just a bad guy suspected of causing a biochemical crisis. There is no possibility of cooperation between us. Luo Guang would not follow the plotline of "Madam, you don't want to. I am willing to surrender and accept punishment. As long as you can resurrect my daughter." Miranda immediately put forward the bargaining chip. Luo Guang was silent for a while and asked, "Your daughter's only memory is in this space, right?" Miranda nodded and replied, "Yes, I just need an ideal container to hold these memories." However, the next second, she heard the cruel answer given by the other party. "The one who is resurrected in that way is not your daughter, but just a doll with your daughter's memory. The feelings you have accumulated with her will also disappear." It is easy for Luo Guang to create a suitable body, but in his opinion, simply transferring memories to a new body is useless. For example, after he created a new body for Evelyn's spirit to enter, it would only make the bad kid have a body again. The feelings and concepts brought by his life experience will still exist, so his personality is still awkward and difficult to train. But Miranda's daughter is different. Simply transferring memories into a new body will not get Miranda's daughter with her original personality, but a person who has lost any emotions and has no values. Even if he recalled the things in his memory, he would only feel that he was watching other people's things, and he would not have the feeling of loving his mother on his own. He told the situation frankly without any concealment, because he knew that the other party could not accept this. Miranda was furious as he expected, because he denied not only the existence of Miranda's daughter, but also her efforts over the years. Luo Guang looked at Miranda, who hysterically denied his words and did not speak again. The Ficado clone had found the cave church and Miranda's body. His body was in a praying posture, and his consciousness had long been wandering in the sky, and he did not find the Ficado clone who had sneaked in. Since he was ready for a decisive battle, he did not say anything more, and condensed an invisible spiritual sword in his hand and killed the enemy. Miranda's reaction was not slow, not to mention that Luo Guang was in her own spiritual space at this time. One's own space is the master, just like Luo Guang wanted to leave his spiritual space, and he would open the channel by himself. The reason why Evelyn could not do this was because no one taught her, and she had no idea of studying this aspect. Miranda dodged the attack with a teleportation move. With a wave of her arm, a hellfire that seemed to be able to burn the soul appeared in front of her and surged towards Luo Guang like a wave. It was not as easy to deal with as in the game. Luo Guang was most proficient in the use of mental power in defense, so he ignored the opponent's attack, rushed out of the flames, and attacked Miranda. However, the enemy teleported again to avoid the attack, and then counterattacked. The two sides fought for several rounds, and the battle between the two sides looked more like a battle between two immortals. Miranda was omnipotent, but although she avoided the attack, she could not break Luo Guang's defense. He thought for a while, and the sword in his hand turned into a giant hammer several times his size, and then attacked again. Miranda avoided the attack again, but the entire mental space shook, and her teleportation speed slowed down. She looked at Luo Guang and was surprised to find that there was a hole in the ground, and it was pitch black inside. Miranda had been studying this space, so she naturally understood what it meant. However, Luo Guang would not give her a chance to catch her breath or think, and attacked again with the giant hammer of mental power. Although it was difficult for him to catch the opponent's mental body and attack, as long as the mental space was destroyed, Miranda would naturally not be able to use the teleportation ability. Miranda avoided the attack while trying to repair the mental space, and the Fungus Master was also helping her, trying to remove the foreign matter from the server. However, Luo Guang did not stop, and tirelessly launched another attack. Miranda tried the same trick again, trying to teleport to avoid it, but her body shook and fell into a deadlock, unable to teleport. She felt bad and was hit directly by the giant hammer. At the same time, the ground under her feet was also smashed open, and she fell directly and left her mental space. Luo Guang followed closely and took advantage of the victory to pursue. In the real world, Ficado's clone attacked with a sneak attack, directly beheaded the enemy, and injected the Shinra virus prepared in advance into Miranda's real brain. Although it is not much different from the game, in order to completely eliminate the enemy, he still has to use the Shinra virus to control the enemy and make it spit out all the information. Miranda was thrown into a dark mental channel by Luo Guang, and instantly lost the ability to teleport, and could only be beaten unilaterally by Luo Guang. Soon her spirit body was smashed into pieces by Luo Guang amidst shouts of 800. After Luo Guang controlled the Ficado clone to ask Miranda for the information he needed, the next thing was a natural thing. Shirley and Jack, who received support from the BSA troops, also encountered a lot of trouble when they raided the Heisenberg factory. Unlike werewolves, the enemies in the factory are semi-mechanical mutants transformed from male corpses, divided into two types, mechanical transport soldiers and biochemical armored soldiers. The former is okay, just like ordinary werewolves, they can be eliminated by smashing their brains, but the latter are equipped with steel armor and mechanical weapons such as drills, and hitting the head cannot stop them from attacking. In the end, it was Ficado's clone who told Jack and the others that the weakness of this biochemical soldier was the vents of the gift reactor on his body, which enabled them to advance. Karl Heisenberg, one of the four nobles, came to the open area of the factory facing the pressing steps of Jack and the two men. He has the ability to manipulate metal similar to Magneto. He fuses his mutated body with various metal machines, turning himself into a giant mechanical monster. Shirley and Jack did not back down. They got on the war machine in the factory and cooperated with the firepower of the helicopter to successfully eliminate each other. When they eliminated Heisenberg and returned to the temporary camp in the village from the factory, the areas in charge of other nobles were also cleaned up by the troops of the European branch of BSAT, leaving only the Fungus Master who had not been dealt with. The task of blowing up the Fungus Master was completed by Luo Guang himself by controlling his clone. He did not leave it to anyone else, nor did he let anyone from BSAT come over to collect samples. When Facardo's clone returned to the camp, the BSAT troops had received orders to temporarily evacuate to a transit camp 3 kilometers away. Shirley and Jack were sitting in a helicopter that had started, waiting for their uncle Facardo. The clone got on the helicopter. After Jack controlled the helicopter to take off, Shirley asked, "Why do we need to evacuate first? We haven't checked and confirmed whether there are any biological monsters around." Luo Guang controlled the clone and pressed the wireless detonator in his hand with a smile. With the violent shaking of the ground and the appearance of the mushroom cloud, the answer was self-evident. "Call it done. I'll leave the rest to you young people." After settling Miranda's matter, Luo Guang stretched himself while sitting in the office. Although he had become the commander of BSAT, the tradition of taking vacations could not be lost. Over.